Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar regarding Wimborne to Lostock Railham. My name is Jonathan, and I'm an engagement executive for HS2. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. As you will understand, we are unable to hold large information events at the moment due to COVID-19, and we hope this webinar will help you keep informed about the design refinement consultation and updates for your area, and give you an opportunity to ask general questions which you may have. During the webinar, you will hear from our engagement manager for your area, before we move into a question and answer session where we will be joined by a team of specialists, where we will answer as many questions as time permits. Please note that we will only be able to answer general questions. Any questions relating to your individual circumstances should be raised via our help desk, who will be able to provide you with the specific advice for your needs. If we get a lot of questions around the same topic, we may group these together and answer as one to avoid repeating answers. If we do run out of time to answer questions and you feel you have not had your question answered, again, we would ask that you contact our help desk. Before I hand over to my colleague John, I want to share some technical information with you. We don't anticipate any technical issues during our event. However, we wanted to provide some advice should you experience any connection issues. If your feed freezes, wait for about 10 seconds, as it will most likely correct itself. If this doesn't happen, use the leave button to exit the call and rejoin using the event link. You will be able to use the toggle at the bottom of your screen to rewind back to where you left the event. You can also use this functionality at any point during the call, should you need to pause for any reason. If there is a freeze or you disconnect and you are unable to rejoin due to a wider Microsoft incident, we will email you with further information. As I've mentioned, there is a question and answer session and comment function, which you should be able to find at the top right of your screen. My colleague Laura will be keeping an eye on the questions that come through as we go, and then at the end of the session today, she will ask the team here to answer as many of them as we have time to get through. Please note, we will only answer questions of a general nature. Any questions relating to your individual circumstances should be raised via our help desk. If we get a lot of questions come in around the same topic, we may group these together and answer as one to avoid repeating answers. If you have previously attended one of our local information events or drop-ins, you may be familiar with our next speaker, who will talk you through the purpose of today's session. John, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hi to all on the webinar today. So this webinar covers the community area MA02, which runs approximately 15 kilometres from Wimborne in the south to Lostock Railham further north. We're going to cover a proposed refinement to the design in your area that we're consulting on. And we're going to look at some other changes we've made to our proposals. Ground investigations also will be included, and we'll say something at the end about what to expect from us in the future. All of the information can now be found on the HS2 website, or you can contact our 24-hour help desk. Details for both will be provided at the end of the presentation. First, I'll summarise the proposed design refinement in MA02, to your community, and this is the introduction of a Crewe Northern connection and changes to the design of the Crewe North rolling stock depot. And those two features together are one of 4 proposed refinements to the design of the new railway that we're consulting on as part of our Western Leg design refinement consultation. The others, as you can see on the slide, relate to changes at the high-speed stations proposed at Manchester Airport and Piccadilly, and a new train stabling facility at Annandale in Scotland. The consultation started on the 7th of October and runs on to the 11th of December 2020. I'd like to encourage you to let us know what you think about those proposed changes. So the first part of this refinement, we're going to look at the introduction of a Crewe Northern connection, which sits mostly in the community area to the south MA01, but also in MA02. So this junction would connect the West Coast Main Line with the new high-speed railway north of Crewe, and that would allow high-speed trains to cross between the two without having to slow down or stop. And we think this brings several benefits. The Crewe North connection would connect Crewe to the future Northern Powerhouse rail network and allow HS2 services to stop at Crewe and rejoin the HS2 network to head north. It will allow the opportunity for more HS2 services to stop at Crewe, in addition to the True trains are now currently provisioned. It allows the opportunity of capacity release and journey time improvements by routing Crewe Manchester Airport and Crewe Birmingham services over HS2 track. HS2 services will be able to service Preston and Lancaster from Crewe, avoiding the constrained Winsford Weaver section of the West Coast Main Line. So on this slide, you can see the previously shown design in the area at the top and the proposed refinement, including the new connection at the bottom to the left of the plan there. You can make it out. So the Crewe Northern connection will help support the delivery of the government's wider strategic vision for a Crewe hub, and it will enhance regional connectivity and improve journey times to the north, the northwest and Scotland. The plan on the screen now shows the proposed rolling stock depot at Wimblesley. The depot would serve as the operational and maintenance hub for rolling stock on the western leg. It would accommodate stabling yards where trains would be stabled overnight, offices and maintenance facilities. Since our working draft was issued in 2018, the footprint has increased from 60 to 65 hectares. A new feature of this is the inclusion of an infrastructure maintenance base rail, and we use the acronym IMBR, and you can probably spot that at the southern end of the depot and the left-hand side of the slide there. So the IMBR would be used to stable maintenance trains during the day before they're used to carry out maintenance activities along the route during the night. You can also see on the plan updated road improvements around the depot, and we're going to look at those in more detail later. And we don't expect the changes to the RSD that we're showing here to cause a significant worsening of impacts to Wimblesley. So the new junction and the expansion of the rolling stock depot will increase the amount of rail infrastructure in the area, but we do believe these are key to delivering important benefits for future services. This slide shows a visualisation of the Crewe North rolling stock depot at Wimblesley. We're looking at it from near the Verdin Arms pub, so that's just west of the A530 bridge over the West Coast Main Line, with Wimblesley Hall. You can just see that there on the left. So for more information about these proposals and the consultation and how to respond, please visit www.hs2.org.uk/phase 2B. So all the feedback from the consultation will be considered by the Minister of State, and he will decide whether to include these changes in the design of the route for phase 2B before we deposit the hybrid bill in Parliament. So as well as the consultation, I'd like to tell you about some of the other changes that we've made to the design in your area as part of a route-wide update since our working draft environmental statement consultation back in 2018. And listening to the local community is central to our commitment to being a good neighbour. It provides a really invaluable source of local knowledge, and we do try to incorporate this feedback wherever it's feasibly possible. And I'd like to look now at some of the examples of the changes we've made in response to the issues and concerns that you've raised with us. And starting at the southern end of the community area, have a look at Clyde Green Lane. You raised concerns about the likely increased congestion and delays on Clive Green Lane, particularly at the canal crossing and at the A530 junction, and this was due to the main entrance to the rolling stock depot being on Clive Green Lane. So you'll see from comparing where we were in 2018 with the updated design that we've realigned Clive Green Lane slightly, and we've now moved the crossing of the canal a little further south of its current position. And that's also going to be straightened out to allow vehicles to pass more freely. At Colpit Lane, further down the bottom of Clive Green Lane, a new roundabout is proposed. It'll be a roundabout for the A530, Clive Green Lane and Colpit Lane, and it'll simplify that complicated and rather busy little junction that we've got at the moment and help to reduce traffic congestion. You also raised concerns about the scale and look of the railway where it crosses the A54 and A533. And you can see there we made some considerable changes in that area. We've altered the design so that the new road, which combines the two old roads, now passes under the railway, which means we no longer need the large embankments that you saw back in 2018. And you can see from the two plans the new roundabouts and link roads that were proposed to the west of the line can now be moved much closer to the railway line, so that we don't need to take as much land. Construction compounds, you asked us to look at reducing the number and the size of the compounds in this area. Well, we've removed two compounds at Gadbrook and off the Davenham Road, and others such as the A556 Chester Road compound at Birches Lane have been made smaller. At Lostock Green, you said it was important that there's a safe route for pedestrians across the A556 at Lostock Green, and we will provide a new footpath under the road close to Wade Brook, and you can probably spot that there near the centre of the plan. Our plans also show new information about utilities and where we will need to do work on things such as gas, water and electricity to protect supply during HS2 construction. So our newly published maps for the first time show the land required for us to do this work. And you can see an example of how utility diversions worked, and it's shown on the plans on the screen at the moment. So this is showing where we need to realign some utilities near Moss Lane. The pink area shows the maximum construction space we need to carry out the utility, which is shown within the pink area as a dotted line. Our plans also show the construction traffic routes that we'll use to move material around in order to build embankments and cuttings. And these are shown as green dashed lines on the maps that you'll have available to you from the website. And we do understand that construction traffic is a major concern for people, and building the railway will require us to move very large amounts of material. So one thing we're looking at is haul roads, and these are temporary routes within the construction boundary to move our material from one location to another and help us to keep our vehicles moving off the existing road network as much as is practically possible. In the same vein of trying to keep traffic off the main road network, borrow pits are a common and temporary feature of major rail and road schemes, and they help to reduce traffic and meet any shortages in the supply of quality earthworks material. So a borrow pit is an area where material can be excavated to be used for construction. And once a borrow pit is no longer required, it's filled in with leftover material and the land is fully reinstated. So these photos provide examples of what a borrow pit looks like while in use and after reinstatement. And it actually shows works on the M40 at junction 15 near Stratford-on-Avon. We understand that the images that the borough pit show may cause some concern. However, this view would only be seen from the air, and we will erect hoardings around the site to screen the works from view as much as is possible. In most places, the use of borough pits is expected to substantially reduce the number of vehicles on local roads that would otherwise be required to transport materials to and from existing quarries. And there are 4 borough pits located in this community area. 3 of them are located alongside the A530 Nantwich Road, either side of the Shropshire Union Canal. And this first slide shows the first of those borough pits. It's the grey shaded area located immediately alongside the depot at Wimblesley. Further along the A530, we have the second borough pit in MEO2. And as we said before, we'll look at well-maintained hoarding and the possibility of early mitigation planting to provide good quality visual screening of the borough pit from those nearby buildings. This map shows you the third borough pit, and this is one located to the other side of the canal between the railway and Coal Pit Lane. And the last slide shows you the fourth borough pit. Now this one's located next to the M6 near Biley, where a different type of material is needed, which we can't source alongside the line itself. So all of these plans can be seen in full on the maps that have been published as part of this update. So a few words about ground investigations. So many of you know we recently started a round of advanced ground investigation, or GI work, around Cheshire to better understand the challenging ground conditions in this area. So GI, it's the examination and study of the soil, the rocks and the groundwater below the surface. And this information helps us to understand the ground conditions along the route and to ensure that the new railway is constructed safely and efficiently. So further GI work will be carried out across the whole route later in our programme. The GI work will include non-intrusive investigation using geophysics to help build up a digital picture of what's underground, and some intrusive investigations such as drilling and taking samples for testing. You can find more information about anything that you've heard today from our website, and this includes our published plans as well as the outcomes of our consultations on the Working Draft Environmental Statement and the Working Draft Equality Impact Assessment Report back in 2018, and the first design refinement consultation in 2019. And finally, the plans shared with you today will be part of our submission for the Phase 2B hybrid bill to Parliament. And this is how the government gains permission to build this nationally important infrastructure. We expect to have this ready for submission in early 2022, but sooner if possible. Once the bill has been deposited, you'll have a further opportunity to comment on the design and for the changes to be made. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Laura for the questions.
Thank you, John. We'll now move on to some questions. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts for today. So we have joining us today, Helen, who is our Q&A moderator, Mike from our environment team, Nick from engineering, Stephen, traffic and transport, Graham is our depot specialist, Lee from geotechnics, Liam from ground investigations. We also have Cameron joining us from the Department for Transport from their policy team. We also have colleagues from Transport for the North, Jonathan from Strategic Rail, and Tony and Dan from the Communications and Engagement team. Now, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, we will answer as many general questions as possible given the time we have. So I'd like to hand over to my colleague Helen now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Our first question today is for my colleague Stephen, and that is, what arrangements will be made for traffic to and from Middlewich?
Thank you, Helen. As you're aware from looking at the plans, we will be using the roads through Middlewich, the A54 and the A530 for some of our construction traffic. However, we do try to reduce the levels of traffic where we can. As John alluded to earlier, we are looking at aspects such as on-site haul roads to reduce those levels. But where we do put traffic on the roads, we do look at the nature of the road and use that as a consideration as to how much traffic we route down those roads. It may be in some situations that we have to do some small local junction improvements to aid traffic flowing through the area as a result of our construction vehicles being on the road.
Thank you, Stephen. Our next question is for Nick. The elevations are not included in the maps. What is the proposed elevation of the replacement bridge over the A530 at Wimborsley? Also, what will the gradient of the proposed bridge be? And also, what are the elevations of the HS2 line and additional lines within the area of the rolling stock depot?
Thank you, Helen. So the topography in this area is quite flat. So the elevations of the main line from the crossing of the A530 up to the end of the Crewe North rolling stock depot vary between 1 and 3 meters above existing ground level. In terms of the depot, the levels are quite similar to the main line, and that is to minimize the requirement for any retaining structures between the depot and the main line. Now, the A530, the realignment of Nantwich Road, has been designed in accordance with the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges. The maximum gradient is 4.5%, and the maximum height of the structure is 12.7 meters above existing ground level. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you, Nick. Our next question, the graphic for phase 2B is confusing. Do all of the HS2 services stop at Crewe? Cameron, I will ask you to answer that one, please.
Thanks, Helen. So the current plan is that all HS2 trains will stop at Crewe, but we've not finalised the terms of service due to the fact the railway won't be open for several years. Once we do that, we'll update people.
Thank you. Our next question. The route to Lostock Rowlham appears to cross the A556 at multiple points. Can this be cut down to one, or must there be 2 major bridge constructions along one small stretch? Nick, I think this one is for you.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So if we look closely at the map, we will see one crossing of the A556, which is at the junction between the A556 and A559. Now, just because we're proposing only one crossing of that highway, we have to realign the A556 from the Broken Cross roundabout just to the west of the proposed alignment of the main line. So by realigning the A556, we are creating space for the main line and minimize the requirement for having viaducts on top of this highway. The other thing that's quite key to note is that the realignment of that highway, that is our approach for all highway realignments, we attempt to maximize offline construction, and that way we limit disruption to the local traffic as well. Thank you.
Our next question, the document implies that the IMBR will work in conjunction with Stone in phase 2A. Does this mean that this area will be in use prior to phase 2B? And if so, when will this be brought into operation? Nick, I think this is for you again.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. The IMBR at Crewe will be delivered at the same timescales as the Western Leg for phase 2B. Yes, it is correct that this IMBR is a supplementary facility to support the maintenance of the railway, similar to phase 1. So our main infrastructure maintenance depot is proposed at Calvert, which is approximately midway in the line between London and Birmingham. Now, in order to facilitate the maintenance of the entire railway, we are proposing those satellite infrastructure maintenance bases. Yes, Stone does have one. There is an IMBR at Stone to support the area, the phase 2A area. But in terms of phase 2B, we will have 2 IMBRs, one at Ashley and one just south of the proposed Crewe North Rolling Stock Depot. So in short, the answer is that the Crewe IMBR will be delivered as part of the phase 2B western leg, similar to Ashley, and yes, it will support the maintenance of the railway.
Thank you. The photos illustrating what the operational position looks like. How many years post-operation will it take until the surroundings look like in the photograph? Mike, could you answer that one, please?
Sure. Hi, thanks for the question. So our visualizations for the operational scheme are taken as a mixture of at the opening year and also at year 15. So it's hard to distinguish from exactly which visualization you're referring to, but it's likely that that would be a year 15 montage where the planting has matured to a sufficient degree. Back to you, Helen.
Our next question, how is all of the intrusive work going to affect the underground salt mines and minimise the risk of subsidence with all of the underground mines? Lee, please could I ask that you pick that up?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we've been engaging with the various salt producers in the area. There are both mines and deep caverns. We've been looking at what their current plans are, what their future plans are. And the way that we will minimise impact is that we, through our ground investigations, we will be ensuring that we're not going to cause any disruption to the current groundwater regime, because the salt in the ground lives in harmony with the groundwater and the brine that protects it. And we will be looking at loadings that go onto the mines, but we have to remember that these mines and caverns, although they're very large, are very deep, and effectively HS2 is going to be much more constrained to the surface effects on the ground. Where there is a chance of any water getting down to depth or any disturbance to the mines, we'll be putting in measures to prevent that occurring, and also monitoring to see what the effects of the works are and if we need to do any additional work. I think that's answered that point, unless there's any follow-up, but so back to you, Helen.
No follow-up at the moment. I may come back to you later if any other questions come in around that. Could you specify how you will mitigate interruption to Winsford Industrial Estate, please? Stephen, I think that one's for you.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, as part of our assessment of the scheme, we actually look at the junctions in and around our construction routes and undertake detailed analysis of those junctions. And if it's showing that there's significant delay being introduced at those junctions, we look into the options of improving those junctions to bring traffic levels back down to a more manageable level.
John, what are the revised timescales for build, compensation, expected date the rail becomes operational?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Well, as I said in the presentation, the first thing we've got to do is get our bill ready for Parliament, and we're looking at the early part of 2022 to do that. So assuming we make that target, we have the passage through Parliament from early 2022. Difficult to assess absolutely accurately how long that will take. We normally think about sort of three to 4 years, but we may be able to learn lessons from the other phases and do that quicker. But if you go roughly on that assumption before we get what we call royal assent, which is the act becoming a bill, and then we kind of estimate that the whole of the construction process and would be roughly a 10-year program. So we do tend to talking in a sort of a range now rather than a specific date for coming into operation. But if we're talking about trains actually running, we'd be looking somewhere between 2035 to 2040. Sorry, was there anything else? Did I miss anything else?
I don't think so, John. No, thank you very much for that. With the change of route through Middlewich, will there be any more mandatory purchase orders on properties, and will affected residents receive compensation? Cameron, one for you, I think.
Yep, thanks, Helen. So anyone who has been affected by the new plans with regards potential purchase of their land or property has been written to set up a one-to-one appointment with HS2 specialists, and we've also updated the revised safeguarding directions, which means that the existing safeguarding and proposals are now open to those people. So if you are affected, you should have heard from HS2 already.
My apologies. We have a question about the design speed. Nick, is that something that you could cover?
Yeah, sure. So the design speed for the main line is 360 kilometers an hour. The alignment is designed for 400 kph. Then once the Manchester Spur builds off the main line, the design speed becomes 230 kilometers an hour as we approach the stations, and the main line to Goulburn continues at 360. Now, in terms of Crewe Northern connection, which is a junction between the West Coast main line and the HS2 main line just north of Crewe, the design speed for that is 200 kph to align with the design speed of the conventional railway network.
Thank you. Graham, can I ask you, please, what will the additional impact of light and noise as a result of the increased works at the depot be?
How are you doing? Helen, I think that might be better if Mike answers that question.
Not a problem. Mike, please could you take that one for me?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of light pollution and noise pollution as a result of the depot, our depots are designed in line of high standards, and a lot of the maintenance and strategic work at the depot will be in enclosed areas, so noise will be controlled as part of that and in line with our environmental minimum requirements set out in the bill. Lighting will be designed sensitively, and we also have our landscape design, which is designed to mitigate views of the depot from nearby receptors. That's all.
We have a question about the A556 realignment. At the moment, it's not shown on the plans in the presentation that we provided. Other supporting documents cannot be found about the specific realignment at the junction between the A559 and the A556. Is the realignment design complete, or is that in progress? Nick, I'll have to ask you that one, please.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I think we have provided the CT06 maps for DRC2 and, well, for the route-wide update. And on those maps, it's clearly shown that the A556 will be realigned to just west of its existing alignment. I'm not sure whether we have provided any temporary alignments, but yes, those are ready. Those have been prepared and will be included in the hybrid build design. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you. I think I'm about to come straight back to you. We have a question about workers' accommodation. Where will the temporary workers be housed, and what will the impact be on local services?
Yes, there is provision in 3 compounds within community area MAO2 to provide temporary workers accommodation. The accommodation would be well, within prefabricated porta cabins of some sort within the already identified area within our CCB. The 3 compounds where we are proposing temporary workers accommodation are the Crewe Rolling Stock Depot satellite compound. Apologies, I have to consult a table here. So it's also the A54 Middlewich Road satellite compound, which is between the existing A54 and A533 Bostock Road. And lastly, we have the Gadbrook Viaduct North Satellite Compound, which is adjacent to the A530 King Street, just south of the A556. In terms of services, apologies, I forgot to mention that. I'm not sure what the question refers to. If we're referring to utility services, yes, there will be temporary utility connections. If we're talking about journeys for the workers to the compounds, these will be assessed within the ES and reported as part of the ES. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Nick. A question now on borrow pits. When are the likely timescales for the beginning and end of the use of the Biley borrow pit, and during what hours will it be operating, and what will be the impact in terms of noise, light and dust? Nick, I think if I come to you for the first part and then potentially hand over to Michael in terms of the environmental issues.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So in terms of the borrow pits, the 3 borrow pits adjacent to the trace are expected to be operational for almost 2 years, and the off-road borrow pit for approximately 3 years. Now, the start dates are envisaged to be in line within the commission, the start of the main work civils, approximately 2026, 2027, but that also depends on the progression of the hybrid bill through select committee. So yeah, it's about 2 to 3 years for all of the borrow pits. Mike, would you like to touch on the environmental effects?
Sure. So in terms of dust controls on the borrow pit sites, this will be similar to a commercial minerals operation and is covered in our Code of Construction Practice. Other controls in terms of ecology, traffic, and air quality would all be set out in the formal environmental statement, which will be deposited alongside the bill.
Thank you there, Mike and Nick. There's a question around the spur. So what does the first, the question is, why does the first map that you show the spur to Manchester to the south of Crewe and not where it actually is to the north of Crewe? I'm not sure if we have that map to bring up, but maybe Nick, if you wouldn't mind just covering briefly the whereabouts the spur to Manchester is, and probably that it's not south of Crewe.
Yeah, the Manchester Spur is actually further north. It's within community area MAO3, just north of the point where we cross over the M6 on a viaduct. The spur we're talking here today is Crewe Northern Connection, which is a great separated junction to connect the HS2 main line and the West Coast main line just north of Crewe. A very similar connection is provided south of Crewe, again connecting the West Coast main line to the HS2 main line, and this one will be delivered as part of phase 2A. These 2 junctions, alongside with some improvement works at Crewe Station and the wider area, constitute the so-called Crewe Hub initiative and Crewe Hub design. I hope that covers the question and potentially resolves the confusion.
Thank you, Nick. There was a further question around where the line goes through Crewe. So you showed a map on the first couple of slides that showed Crewe was on a blue spur line. Is HS2 no longer going through Crewe? I'm not sure if the discussions we've already had maybe cover some of that, but it'd be great if we could just have a little bit of clarity on that point, Nick.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Helen. So from the phase 2A spur, just south of Crewe, the HS2 main line continues in a tunnel beneath Crewe. and that will allow services to go through Crewe, or well, some services, some HS2 services, to go through Crewe without having to use the surface route and stop at the station. So the line emerges from the tunnel just north of Crewe, runs alongside the West Coast Main Line before deviating to the north-northeast, where it's actually the area where we are providing Crewe Northern connection.
Thank you, Nick. There are concerns about the impact of the development of the A556 realignment works and how it will affect the Gadbrook Park. The park is highly populated and employs around 5,000 people. Issue about the traffic movement. Stephen, would you mind answering this one, please?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, with the A556 realignment, as with most of our works, what we try and do is actually open these routes to traffic before closing the existing route. So what we'll actually do is build the 556 realignment whilst the existing one continues to operate. There will be some short closures where we tie the two ends together to reconnect them. But generally, our approach is to try and construct them in parallel to the existing infrastructure. I believe, Nick, you can offer some insight into this as well.
Thanks, Stephen. I think one key point that we need to highlight is that if we compare with the working draft environmental statement design, we will notice that the proposed land take within the Gadbrook Business Park has been limited and a construction compound has been removed. Also, some of the intermediate embankments have been removed and have been substituted with a single viaduct. We are in discussions with the relevant stakeholder and we are seeking to minimize our impact and mitigate any potential adverse effects that the stakeholder may experience. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. We have a further question around the workers at the rolling stock depot. How many workers will be there and how long for, and will they be using local shops and services? Mike, please can I ask that you pick that one up?
So in terms of local services, so as we already discussed, this will be assessed in the ES. We don't anticipate with the mitigation measures that we have that there would be a significant effect on local services. We will have an operational travel plan for the depot, which would encourage workers to use sustainable methods of transport. And also, obviously, temporary workers' accommodation will ensure that workers are staying on site, limiting the impact on the local community. In terms of numbers of workers, Graham, can you provide any input there?
Yes, Mike. The Crewe North Depot will have facilities for circa 600 staff. That will include cleaners, maintenance technicians, engineers, operational staff and managers. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you very much. We have a question about Brookhouse Lane and its use during construction. Stephen, can I ask if you could please cover that one?
Thank you, Helen. I don't believe we use Brookhouse Lane as a construction route. However, we will check that off the plans, and if the individual would like to know the answer to that, please send it through to the help desk and we will confirm. But as I said, I don't believe we use that route at all.
I have a question around, oh, my apologies. I've got a question around the salt mines again. How is all the intrusive work going to affect the underground salt mines and minimise the risk of subsidence? Oh, my apologies, we've already answered that one. Hopefully that one is covered now. We've got one around the height of the embankment near the Verdon Arms. So what height will the rising embankment from the Verdon Arms over both the West Coast Main Line and the HS2 line be? Nick, can I please ask that you cover that one?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I think this has already been answered. The elevation of the main line is between 1 and 3 meters above existing ground level at the point where it runs adjacent to the West Coast main line. Now, if we are some further detail could potentially be provided for the height of the embankments, potentially of the A530, the realignment of the A530 Nantwich Road, but this is not something that I have readily available, so we can take that one away and respond.
Okay, thank you. And going back to the question around the temporary workers and the rolling stock depot, the question is, does your answer regarding the temporary workers imply that there will also be accommodation for permanent workers longer term? Mike, are you able to cover that one?
Yes. So no, they are temporary workers accommodation in essence. So they will be there to support the construction phase. So the accommodation will be as long as the construction phase will be, or the peak of the construction phase.
We have a question that says, query the use of Clive Back Lane. I'm assuming that means that the construction traffic and us using that road. Is there anybody there maybe be able to answer that? Potentially Stephen, would you be able to cover that at all?
We'll be able to answer that, but if you just give me a couple of moments just to make sure that I can get my information straight.
Of course, not a problem.
If you'd like to take another question in the meantime,
of course,
while I'm doing that.
Not a problem. We have a further question relating to what Nick said around the train stopping at Crewe. It says, can we clarify what Nick has just said? Earlier in the presentation, it was stated that all HS2 trains will stop at Crewe, but this is a contradiction to what has just been stated. Nick, I don't suppose, would you like to provide maybe a bit of clarity on that? Can we bring Cameron into the conversation too?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what Crewe North Connection is. So Crewe North Connection is provided by HS2, or is proposed to be provided by HS2 as active provision for the future Northern Powerhouse Rail scheme. Our baseline train service specification does not require the use of that junction. That said, however, our train service specification has been developed for the current design. We do appreciate that there is an opportunity, if it is considered commercially achievable and beneficial, to have some services through Crewe, but that is for our client, the DfT, to advise on and make a decision on. But the point is, the heavy civils will be provided as active provision for NPR by HS2 in order to minimize any future disruption to the brand new HS2 main line. Potentially a colleague from the DfT would like to come in. Cameron?
Yep. I don't really have anything to add to what Nick just said. It's just that, yeah, the current terms of service pattern is set for the current design. Obviously, we're consulting on changes to that design at the moment. And if those changes are confirmed, there will then be a revisit the terms of service pattern.
Thank you. We have a further question around embankment heights. What height will the embankment be near the realignment of the A556 and Broken Cross roundabout? Nick, do you know that off the top of your head?
I would like to say yes, but I don't. So if I can have a minute or two.
That's fine, not a problem. Stephen, is it possible to go back to you on the use of Clive Back Lane, please?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we're using Clive Green Lane for construction traffic, but not Clive Back Lane. Back to you.
Thank you for that. Potentially, I think we are coming to the end of our questions that are specifically about MAO2 and where they maybe don't have sort of personal information. I'm going to give Nick, I'll hand back over to Nick hopefully around the the embankment, and hopefully that will be the answer to our final question.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I can't manage to open the plans and profiles right now, but colleagues have advised that the average height of the embankments is between 8 to 10 meters, where we run adjacent to the A556 Chester Road.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for your questions today, and can I thank the panel as well for their detailed responses. I hope that you found today's webinar useful. All of the information talked about today can be found on the HS2 website, www.hs2.org.uk/phase 2B. If you have any questions or need help accessing the information, please contact our help desk on 08081 434 434 or by Minicom on 08081 456 472, and you can email us at hs2enquiries@hs2.org.uk, or you can visit the website as mentioned, www.hs2.org.uk. Thank you again, and I hope you can enjoy the rest of your day.